Hey, good evening, everybody. What's going on? Hope you're having an awesome week. It's Wednesday, another album club. I'm your host, one of your hosts. I'm Marty. Good to see you. And we are down a guy this week. Our brother Kellen is out preparing for his 100-mile marathon this week, and so hey, cheers to you, brother. Be safe. We're here to support you, but we think it's a bit crazy. But it's cool. It's cool. Um, to each their own. But he'll be back next week with hopefully many tales to tell of his loneliness of the long distance runner. And Jim, how are you?
Oh, doing super great, man. Buying an excessive amount of records lately. I discovered a small record store in Port Orange.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and I don't know how I've heard about it. It's called Rainbow Records. This tiny little place in a strip mall, and dude, they had tons of metal. I had to stop myself. I was super excited. So picked up some cool stuff there, and I will be back, but I was breaking the bank there. But I got this nice little Cassis Luciferi Watain repress here. Sounds great, looks great. Super happy about this. I'm not a fan of Watain's later stuff. I think they kind of got boring, but like these first few records, I really like. And I was a late comer to black metal. Like Sworn to the Black was actually one of the first albums that I ever bought. But it was sort of like a gateway. So it was cool to kind of get back to a little bit of Watain. So that was nice. That was one pick from there. And Marty, you will definitely appreciate this one. It's a repress, but Grand Declaration of War, baby.
Right on. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, this is another one I got from Rainbow Records. I'm super excited to hear this. I like this remaster. I don't usually say that. I'm not, but the bass is louder on this, and the drums sound more organic. So I do actually recommend checking this remaster out. It's pretty good. I think this one came out in 08 or something. I can't see the year right now, but anyway, good stuff. And I got a lot more stuff, but I'm going to spread that out over the coming weeks. And luckily, my wife held me in check because I just kept grabbing, man.
Just don't take her. Don't take her next time. I mean, what after all these years, you haven't learned this by now?
Well, we didn't even know we were going to go. We're like, what are we going to do now? And I was with my brother and his wife, and his wife found it. She's like, hey, well, there's this record store you guys haven't been to yet. We're like, let's go. Dude, they had a Wasp Live in the Raw still sealed, dude.
Oh, wow.
I didn't drop for that one, but anyway, I digress. This I didn't get there. This is Void, Forbidden Morals, Shadow Kingdom Records, thrash band from Louisiana. Sure, Logan, you've heard of these guys. I love this. This is quality, legit thrash. These young guys do it right, man. It sounds like Annihilator meets the music of King Diamond. They dress like Sabotage. I mean, these guys really go all the way. And they sound great. It's super tight, super technical. The first album, it's kind of wonky. You can see they were kind of still finding themselves. But dude, this one is tight. It's technical. It's catchy. It's I definitely felt like I was back in '88, and that's a good thing. This is not like a tribute band. These guys are serious about their thrash. Highly recommend you check this out. It's going on my end of year list. I love it that much. So
Everything about that looks like a Doom record, doesn't it? The cover.
Oh, what
the cover, the name of the band. Yeah, it looks.
I don't know, man. I think there's some. I mean, I think this is more trad metal cover in terms of the painting itself, but I've seen some thrash logos a little bit like that with the steel kind of stuff. So,
am I wrong to think there's like some King Diamond, Merciful Fate in there as well?
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's what I get along with the thrash.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say for me, it's more the King Diamond music. I mean, a little bit of the King Diamond vocal. He doesn't do that falsetto stuff that much, but definitely musically, it's like a car crash between Annihilator and King Diamond, and that's for me is killer. You know what I mean? So love this. Been spinning it a lot. So that's what I've been jamming on this week.
Wow, a lot of cool shit. All right. Always though, right? Always cool shit.
Yeah.
Logan.
Jim delivers. Good to be back. Missed you guys last week. Missed talking about Dissection for sure. Great album. I'm sure it was done justice and beyond. I was in Chicago the past couple days, and just like Jim, I spent way too much money, but could have spent a lot more. A lot more. I was mainly CDs though versus records. God only knows what it'd be like if I was buying records. But it was a good trip. Shout out to Chris Depeche Commode who put me up for a night, dealt with my drunken ass, and then Brian and Dreadful Rick both made an appearance too. So
Awesome.
cheers, gentlemen. Fun times in Chicagoland. So these are basically all from there, just mainly CDs. First, Meteor Gym is a place you got to go to if you haven't been out in Chicago. That record store is like a carnival heaven for metalheads. It's just all metal, a little bit of hardcore. It's sick across the board. I went out, of course, with heavy heart on the day we flew out. So we found out that Thomas Lindbergh passed away. I was mainly into him for At the Gates, but after his passing, I checked out Dysphere. I don't know why it took me this long. This stuff is awesome. And sure enough, I run into their debut, or not their debut with Lindbergh. I mean, this is probably like their fourth album, but Misanthropic Generation, fist pumping, crusty, like Motorhead style crust. I don't know if you would call this crust or not, Marty. I'm gonna pass that off to you since I'm not necessarily the
There's
crust.
crusty elements to it, but you know.
Yeah, it's just an interesting mix of like punk and metal and everything in between. And then I'm big. I'm on the fence with Enslaved, but I was able to find one of the first Enslaved albums that I ever got into, Vertebrae. And I would say when I say I'm on the fence, it's more like they have such a huge catalog. I haven't even like broken into half of it. What I started with was definitely this style of the progressive leaning stuff, but I've since transitioned into the Viking stuff, and this is what's been really working for me more recently with their catalog. I mean, Bloodhem is probably my current favorite, either that or Frost. But it was good to finally pick up a copy of the first one I ever heard, Vertebrae. So The Watcher is still one of my favorite Enslaved songs for sure, and just a top song across the board. And then finally, for tonight, I'll mention I got another Gamma Ray CD. Look at that. Sigh No More. Classic Gamma Ray. When they're being a rock and roll 80s hair 70s band. A lot of interesting influences here, mainly, as I said, from like the 80s hair and 70s like hard rock style. But I think I can hear some of their power metal stuff like seeping through. There's a couple good tracks I like to start with. Start Running, The Spirit, Dream Healer. But I don't know. It was cheap. The album cover is honestly perfectly ridiculous. I thought this was a CGI skeleton, but no, they actually dressed up.
That was way before CGI. Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah.
This is a dressed up school skeleton in a suit. So
Oh, you did your deep dive on the cover. How stupid the cover is. Nice.
I did. I'm fully in.
Right on. Cool. Well, good to see you guys. Thanks for joining us. And for myself, yeah, I've kind of fallen off the wagon. I've been buying some stuff, but yeah. I've finally started checking out this Stangarigel, their latest album. Something or other. These guys are from, I could be wrong, Czechia. I could be wrong. But yeah, this is their latest album. Probably gonna be on my year-end list. Really excellent black metal. Second half is better than the first half. I also got the EP. This one I might be able to tackle. Metaphysica Barbarstuva. I don't know. So yeah, excellent black metal, really atmospheric, good stuff. It's fall time. I'm in the mood. Just reviewed this on Monday. If you checked it out, thanks for checking out the review. The new Yendud album. I can't remember how to say. I looked it up and tried to commit how you pronounce the name of the album in my head, but it's left me. But yeah, this is great. Check out my review on that. Absolutely solid. It sounds like old style Norwegian black metal, but a little bit more brutal. I had to laugh at this band photo. The guy is trying to, like hung himself. Then he's wearing Crocs. One of the Crocs is over here. I thought that was a funny little touch. Anyway, yeah, me and the kid went on a ride the other night and we checked out the Angra Temple of Shadows album. Good South American power metal, really well done. Kai Hansen makes an appearance on this one vocally. Good, solid, fun, aggressive. They just are a good band. But yeah, we are here tonight. Logan picked World Without God by Finland's Convulse. A little bit of history here. Convulse is a Finnish death metal band from Nokia, active between 88 and 94, and again since 2012. They were one of the country's first extreme metal bands and considered by some to be the forefathers of the local Nokia metal scene. There's a whole bunch of history here on demos and stuff. If you want to check that out, go to Wikipedia and look it up yourself. But yeah, fellas, first impressions. Jim.
Oh man, I checked this out on title alone. I just, I loved the simple and powerful statement, "World Without God." I was like, okay. And I noticed back in the day that it was also, it came up a lot in Hell's Headbangers, and so I was like, I gotta kind of check this out, and Finnish death metal, grimy and dirty. Like that's the way I like my Finnish death metal. I like it just be super filthy, and for some reason I hadn't heard Convulse, and but when I finally checked it out. Yeah, it was like, okay, I'm gonna buy this now. Yeah, so it's interesting. It's when I first played it on vinyl, it didn't sound that way to me on headphones. I was like, oh man, is my record warped? But I realized later that they tuned so low that their intonation's a little bit out on the album. But that's great. I mean, that's just a testament to the dirtiness of this record. Like just going for it, man. Like let's just get down there. Let's make this muddy as hell, deep dark death metal record. And it just delivers. It's one of those albums that I've been able to put on at any time and have a great time with. So this was love at first listen for me, and I was definitely stoked when Logan chose it, because I'm like, oh, this is gonna be an easy week. Oh, I get to listen to a record that I love over and over again. I think I can do that.
Right.
So spoiler alert, it's gonna be a lot of gushing for me tonight. This isn't technical stuff. It's ugly. But man. I mean, that's the origins of death metal right here. So I think 1991, Finland, bring it on, man.
Yeah, and I've had a very interesting evolution with this album, and it finally clicked with me this week. I was trying to figure out why I don't own this. I thought I had it, dug through my shit, then I realized, a friend of mine burned it for me and like printed out a cover and stuff. And for some reason I didn't keep it. And I remember being very underwhelmed by this record and putting it on, kind of just driving around, not paying very much attention to it in the shop and whatever. It just I'm like, yeah. It's just one of those bands. It does what it does really well. It's old school death metal, but it reminds me of bands like England's Cancer or Florida's Massacre that are good, but they're just kind of boring to me. And then I realized the more I started like putting this on and listening to it, like really listening to it, there's a lack in the guitar tone. It's very rounded off and kind of, there's not much gain or distortion to it. It's just tuned low and just murky, nasty sounding. There's not a lot of attack in the guitars. There's not a lot of treble in the guitars, and the guitar sound hides the nuances that's in this music. And it kind of hides some of the interesting things that they're doing. So once I finally got my head wrapped around really paying attention, I'm like, holy shit, this album is awesome. And I've been all these years, I've just kind of like, Massacre, I Could Take or Leave, Cancer. I thought they've always thought they were boring. But so yeah, I always kind of lump them in there. And there are moments of that on this record where the songs are just kind of mid-paced and crunching along, and you're like, okay. But then they go into these interesting transitions, which we'll get into, that it's just, they're a little sometimes strained transitions, but that's part of the charm. It kind of harkens back to that old thrash thing. The transitions may not be completely great, but it adds to it. I don't know. I ended up really liking this record and kind of regret not having a copy of it, but I'm sure that'll change. It's been reissued and stuff. But yeah, for me, it was kind of a come to Jesus moment with this record. And it really took putting on headphones and listening to it repeated times to finally hear what's actually going on. So Logan, obviously you picked it. What did you think?
Yeah, this album came pretty early on in my death metal journey. I guess I kind of lucked out, and I got into death metal like 2010, 2011, and that was right around the time Relapse was doing the reissues and stuff. So I was able to snag a reissue for a good price, and this was kind of my first window into the Finnish death metal scene. Up to this point, I was feeling fairly well versed in like the Florida Sound and some other like American bands like New York death metal, and of course Sweden. I was into Dismember and Entombed, but this was a whole new world, a whole new level down, and it kind of felt like it to me. Like the feel of this album is so much murkier and has a slimy kind of feeling to it. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the guitars, because that might be one of the reasons why it felt so different to me, because it's a very bass driven and like tonality driven album on the lower end. And I think that's one reason why it initially stood out to me, was because of how bass forward it was, and it balances out this doomy vibe with like relentless death metal that almost has a Swedish kind of feel to it at times, mainly thanks to the drummer. But at the end of the day, I think it's a perfect representation of what Finnish death metal is, and I do think it could be one of the first full lengths from the Finnish death metal scene in 1991. I know Gavin in the comments mentioned it, and in my perusing, I haven't found a Finnish death metal album full length released sooner than this one. But I think it's a mammoth landmark for the sound, and for me, it was a great introduction to just how dark, murky, doomy, and most importantly, evil this scene can be. And yeah, definitely was excited to talk about not only Convulse's legacy, but also Finland's unique death metal legacy, which takes me to my question. So Finland's death metal scene is not one composed of bands with storied or prolific careers. Instead, most bands opt for either a one and done or a one and done release, or they completely change their sound after that first influential album. What about this scene contributed to bands changing it up or breaking up so often? In the long run, has this helped or hurt the legacy of the Finnish death metal scene?
Jim.
It's a tough one because I don't know historical facts as to the whys here. But it is a very interesting question because you're right. We think about Demilich, we think about the Spinth, we think about Slumber of Sullen Eyes for Demigod, and we think of Demilich,
Amorphis.
Well, yeah. I guess that's those guys had, I guess, a few that were really strong. But I think, what was that?
Sentenced.
Okay, so
are those in 91?
Well, even Sentenced. Really, I only care about two of their albums. So, Amok and North from Here. So I still, and really the only two Amorphis records I have are whatever the Lakes one and
Corelli and Isthmus is their debut.
Yeah, Corelli and Isthmus. Yeah, that's the one. I actually bought that from your distros. First Amorphis I ever had, Marty.
Yep.
But Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, what the reasons are. But I don't think it's helped because the quality of all those albums I just mentioned, and that Marty threw in as well, they're all so high that I never thought of that fact that what most bands only put out like one or two like really distinct albums, and but that's okay because when I look back on my own personal collection, like most of my records, unless it's a band that I really love and follow a lot, like Evoken or Death, bands that I want to have everything they do. I only have like 1 to 3 records in their discography. You know what I mean? Because I just like, okay, those are great records and that's it. Like I don't feel that completionist need with a lot of bands. So I guess that's why it never really struck me as like an aspect of the death metal culture in Finland. Like, well, they put out this really great record and then that was it. I guess except for me, like I would say that I did kind of notice that with Demilich. I mean, everybody's pretty much aware of that, and for me, Psychostasia is really the only Demilich I need. But I love both those records a lot. Who doesn't? So yeah, I think for me, like I wouldn't know what the reasons are, maybe, and Marty could speak to this because he's way more aware, knowledgeable about Finland's black metal scene than I am, and he's also Finnish as well, as most of you guys know. But I wonder if it was like, the pull of like black metal. Maybe some of these guys were finding themselves in different styles of bands and stuff like that. Because that, as like death metal was kind of hitting its peak, black metal is like hitting its, and then death metal starting to decline, in that region. So maybe that had something to do. Maybe the rise of black metal had something to do with bands not sticking around too long. But I don't think it's impacted their legacy negatively at all, because the strength of all those records is so high. I mean, we can't think of death metal without thinking of at least 1 or 2 or 3 of those albums. So nah, I don't. In the end, man, it doesn't matter. Like the number of records you put out, whether we're talking about a country or a band or a genre. What matters is the quality of those records. So, yeah, hasn't changed anything for me, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting question. And if you look at bands like Sentenced and Amorphis, for an instance, like Sentence, the first 4 in Sentence records sound like completely different bands from each other. Each one sounds like a different band. Each one, once you get past the first 2, start to adopt more of a bit of commercialism to them, as did Amorphis. As Amorphis went, they went off on some weird tangents, 70s prog, whatever you want to call it. So from my observation, the bands that stuck around became legacy. Well, Sentence broke up, but those bands, they leaned into the commercial side. They leaned into what was popular in the European metal thing. They became festival bands, which is fine. The debut Sentence record is pretty brutal, kids playing brutal music. And but then you look at Demigod or Demilich, one and done bands, and they both possess this murkiness, this weird twisted. They're different than their neighbors. They don't sound like Swedish death metal. And the fact that they were one and done bands, and for the longest time, their music was scarce, rare, expensive. So when you were to actually achieve a copy, it was coveted, and then it didn't hurt the fact that you hit play and it's some of the most dark and twisted, cool. It's funny. You've got Norway, Sweden, Finland, all connected at the tip, and they all have their own sound, whether it's black metal or death metal. They all sound like different. It's amazing. It's like, death metal from Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, that you'd think they'd all have a kind of a similarity, but they all sound completely different from each other. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird how that happens. You think there would be some commonality there, but what about this scene contributed to bands I don't know. I don't know. Other than it's a very small country. and there's a bunch of musicians. There's just things don't work out, you move on to the next band. I'm sure like the black metal scene is very incestuous. There's just a lot of bands share a lot of different members, and of course, a lot of these bands, they start off with their high school band, and they break up, and what was Abhorrence became Amorphis, and then Amorphis became a big band. They became a big band, toured the world. They've been out, they just put out a new record last week. Pretty solid. They're kind of back to their oldish, middle era kind of style. And I don't know how to answer your question. Does it hurt the legacy? I think actually the legacy of Finnish death metal, I think, is special because of the scarcity of it. I think it makes it, the fact that when it came out, it was so essential, and so it felt so passionate and vital and dark and murky that it made it special. And they didn't take time. A lot of these bands didn't take time to evolve that much. It was a one and done, and they left you kind of wanted more. So what do you think about it, Logan?
Yeah, so I guess initially for this question, I just wanted to hear your thoughts, if you had any different perspectives on it, since y'all were there in the 90s, and I didn't know if you had an insight, because to me it's just funny looking back on it, someone getting into metal in like the 2000s, 2010s, that all the death metal bands, there's not a single one that stuck with death metal that ended up being like an Entombed or Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse. There's no lifelong death metal bands. Hell, the Finnish bands that I first became aware of were, of course, Amorphis was one of them, and then Insomnium was probably another one. All of these bands more known for being melodic and focusing on like the melody of their culture more so than just trying to be brutal. So I was wondering if there was like a cultural push, for in that direction or something. For me, I guess my thoughts on just venturing a guess on why it's a one and done for all these bands that really tried to make death metal. Maybe it was an age thing. I looked at the age of all the members of Convulse, because that's at least on the archives, and they were all like 17, 18 recording World Without God. So that could be it. And by the time it's out, their tastes have jumped onto the next thing. I don't know if any of you have heard
Taste change quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard Convulse's second album at all, Reflections, but it is entirely different. And for a lot of people, in a terrible way. It's like cathedral Black Sabbath with death metal vocals. I kind of dig it. I'm not gonna lie, but they really did a giant jump from this album to kind of where they landed next. And I mean, obviously, looking at Amorphis and Sentenced, as you said, that that seed of change was already in those bands.
Yeah.
I guess another thought was, maybe there was not a proper label supporting these bands that helped with distribution and actually getting them well known, and helping them feel like, oh, we're accomplishing something, we're actually making a difference, and making money. So maybe that contributed to these bands breaking up more often. But to venture a guess about the legacy, Marty, I think you nailed it with the whole it being exclusive thing. I think the fact that this is kind of all there is really helped. You don't have to wade through all of these giant, long discographies and myriad of bands to find the ones who were actually there at the beginning. That's like kind of the scene, is all these bands that started around the 90s and put out one album between 91 and 96, I think, was a Demilich. So kind of that era, and boom, that's it. And the quality is there for every single one of them, and I think they all sound unique from one another. There was very much, Demilich did not sound like Demigod, which did not sound like a Demilich, and so on. So it was really cool to hear all these guys filtering out their own influences in a way that only a young scene can. And then it's like it just froze, at that time period, because they didn't release anything. And yeah, it's still kind of tough to hunt these albums down today. Like, you're not often gonna find a Finnish death metal album, like a classic one, in your record store. You know, if they repress it, there's some luck. But hell, I finally found Demilich and for the first time just the other week. I've been looking for that thing for a used price for like a decade. So the hunt is still real, I think, when it comes to this scene, which I think helps. You know, we're metal fans. We enjoy feeling like we have the thing that others don't have or haven't heard, and
Yep.
I think that's like the Finnish scene personified. And for whatever reason, to me, when you look at the countries that are well known for death metal, I always think United States, Sweden, Finland. So it's impressive that I would consider them number 3, you know, in that. And I think it's just because of how strong these albums are and how unique the sound is. So I think it did help in the long run.
Right on. Yeah, good question. Discuss the musicality and composition of World Without God. Jim.
Before I jump in, I have to say, Logan is always kind enough to send us his questions like a day in advance, and I should have looked at that so I could do better research. I've learned my lesson this week.
I never look. I never read. I like to be surprised. I like to be surprised.
Why do you think I send them a day in advance?
Yeah.
So they can sit in your email box?
You're not gonna tell me to learn and prepare.
Right.
Do what I want.
It's your show.
Do my own thing.
There's Marty McFly and there's Marty on the fly. That's how he rolls.
Procrastination is the mother of invention.
That's right. Musicality and composition. So I can definitely tell listening to this that these guys are young. There's a lot of simplicity to the riffs and the arrangements. Like, they'll have a riff that kind of reminds me of like something off Scream Bloody Gore, in the way that it'll be the walk, and then they'll just tremolo pick it. A pretty kind of standard sort of thing for death metal. Kind of expected, especially when you're, like me, play the simpler styles because you can't play the technical stuff. But it's delivered with such darkness and just dreariness and it's just dripping with evil that it doesn't matter. Like to me as a listener, like where the complexity in the composition or the riffs themselves are, there's just so much just evil energy behind it that it keeps me coming back for more. And they sort of pepper throughout the album like these little moments that kind of wake you up and bring you out of that and say, wow, that was kind of neat. Like the crazy spooky keyboards on Godless Truth. it's one of my favorite moments of the record. Like, well, they're just like something you'd hear like as you're walking through a Halloween store or something, spirits, and but overlaying these really cool death metal riffs, it just works. And also I like how they'll kind of intersperse these moments where it's like just bass and double bass drums playing together with no guitars, and then they'll put the riffs over that. They'll let that breathe for a second and throwing that on there. And that may not sound like much, but it can really add color when you're down in the depths so much with your riffing and you're down 2 guitars, to break for a minute and to let the drums and the bass just kind of roll out like that. It gives it a lot of energy. So when you step back and you think of that, and then just the sheer enormity of riffs that are throughout the record, that's where the musicality and composition is for me. Not in technical proficiency. That's not what we're talking about with listening to Convulse, but just with the originality of the sound overall. Like, what are they delivering to you, as an album and from a tonal aspect. One of the first bands in Finland to do it, and to do it like this, to my knowledge. I could be wrong. That's somebody please correct me in the chat, but this is 1991, and and I listen to bands that sound like this to this day, from like Crips. Like absolutely love that band from
Another
Finland.
Finnish band, yeah.
Absolutely, and I don't think Crips would exist without this record. And this is this is many years before they even came around. So I think in terms of their impact, the musicality and compositions record is super strong because we can see their influence 20 30 years later, and that's amazing. And to Logan's point earlier, it's okay, it's okay to be 17 and 18 and come up with awesome music. Emperor did it too, like 16, 17, 18. And when I think back at like my most like emotional times, my most rage filled like feelings towards this life in this world, they were kind of in those years. Coming to that feeling of acceptance that took decades to come around, and so I completely understand where this like embracing of these swampy evil Finland in the late spring riffs came from. And it makes sense to me. So I think in terms of capturing a mood, capturing an emotion, evoking that through evil down-tuned guitars and just guttural vocals, they completely succeed in that realm.
All right, Logan.
All right, one of those albums that for me, I think the production and musicality of it kind of go hand in hand. And I think we already talked about it a little bit with like just the guitar choices and how the guitar feels on the album. So
They're almost like Stoner Doom guitar. They're like Stoner Doom guitar sound.
Yes,
I could see that being your wheelhouse 1000%.
That maybe
yeah,
that
you guys
be
like
why.
it's like it's thick, but it doesn't have a lot of gain. Like
There's
the distortion is kind of low. It's a thick guitar sound without. It's because the bass is really high in their frequencies, but the distortion isn't. It's interesting.
And you're kind of left with like this swirling groove, especially when it backs it into like a doom kind of drum feel. You're just like,
yeah, it's there.
Which,
sure.
Come on, that's the sleep face. That's
right.
That's the dope smoker
it's
face.
Here's the sleep face.
That's Marty's sleep face.
Okay, what?
You missed it, Marty. There was a riff.
But, one riff.
I'll tell you about it.
For 40 minutes.
Yeah. I do love the guitar tone and the guitar feel, and it has this slimy, otherworldly, like Lovecraftian vibe to it. Especially when they do these lead breaks or like any kind of lead guitar work. It just has this swirling, like spiritual, like ether kind of vibe to it. And maybe it's because it's like contrasting with how dirgy and sludgy the rest of the band is, with like the bass is like so heavy and amped up in the mix, and the drums are always the double bass is used very well on this album, and it's a good contrast. But the vocals, though, I think do such a great job of like towering above it all. Like it really makes it seem like a wall of noise, and as I said, like a vibe, and it all meshes and hits you like a wall of sound. And the vocal performance, to me, I think is one of the most brutal performances of the early 90s. In my opinion, I can't think of a band that had such a low, like guttural kind of sound in 1991. I mean, Cannibal Corpse had Butchered at Birth, but I feel like this is a step lower than Barnes for sure. But yeah, I love the vocal performance here. Let's see. I think there's some Finnish weirdness as well in like how the transitions happen, and that all the music and the songwriting sounds very windy, and it's like there's not many actual song structures. It feels like you're just going from one sick riff to another, and then it kind of can repeat a little bit. But the one song that is actually like kind of comes out as, oh, is that a chorus? Is the closing track, Power Struggle of Belief. Other than that, it's just a maze of noise and distortion, and it's it's fun to just get lost in, and it's just a great album to kind of experience it wash over you and not be too concerned about the technicality of it, as Jim said. And like I think over time that's when you kind of get hooked on different moments and stuff and different songs, but the sound is just as important as like what the notes they're actually playing. And boom, there's another stoner vibe that I know you've said that that's an issue with stoner music, is it's all more about the sound than
The sound in the
the
field.
songwriting.
Yeah.
And I think that is true here, and I kind of like that. I do like the songs do range from this like thrash intensity at times, like especially when it's building up and it's going bump 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 bump, and just some really like thrashy riffs. But then in a heartbeat, it'll stop and slow down to some autopsy level, doom parts, and you never really get the vibe that they're a death doom band. Just that this is Convulse's sound. They range back and forth wildly. Yeah, the drums are, as I said, another highlight. They have a punk element to me. I feel like that might be the influence of like the Swedish death metal scene. I think of Dismembered a little bit, just hearing like especially the like the kind of the punk beat, if you will. But
the D beat with the 1 2 3, the 1 2 3
Yeah.
4 chord progression over the top. Yeah.
like there's some simple moments and simple sections on this album, but I think because of the sound of it, it all works and it all creates a uniquely dark and menacing experience, which definitely feels like it's from the heart of Finland.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I could see how my initial few impressions did take me to Massacre and Cancer, because there is a level of simplicity on this record that it's undeniable, but it takes, becoming accustomed to the album, really digging in and really listening to it, then it starts to unlock itself, because there are some really cool, interesting transitions on here. Like I mentioned earlier, you could tell these were thrash kids that started playing heavier. They tuned down. Even the drum heads sound tuned down on. There's like this kettle drums of war sound in the drums, and I dig that. Sounds like the heads are about to fall off the rims. It's cool. And but it's the awkwardness in some of the transitions, and they're not afraid to try to throw the speed in. And as we've talked, I think it was the Massacre album that Jim picked. We're talking about a drummer that was trying to play faster than he could, really, but still kind of doing it. There's moments of that on this record where the drummer, you could tell he's really busting ass. He's busting his ass trying to play that halftime blast beat or whatever the hell it is. And there's just such a charm to that. I like that level of speed. Obviously now drummers are technically, musicians' talent has grown exponentially over the years. The techniques get sorted out. Now it's like perfection blasting, the hammer blast, all that stuff, or the hammer blasts and the gravity blasts. I mean, there's just a precision and to it. And just hearing it back then, where it's just a little bit sloppy, maybe a touch off, but it just makes the song feel more like they're really trying hard. It makes it feel more authentic, more essential. You know what I mean? But as far as the songwriting, composition, all that stuff, they've got a formula on this record, and they kind of beat it into the ground. By the end of the album, there's not a lot of differentiation between tracks. Oh, there's the one song that starts off with the bass line. Oh, there's the one song where the bass comes through. It's got a chorus effect or a phaser on it or whatever. Shit like that. Like, oh, there's that one part in the album. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something I noticed, that they're young. They've got it, what they know, figured out really well. And it turned out to be pretty damn influential. It's kind of funny when we mentioned, you mentioned their second album, Reflections. I'm thinking, God, I didn't even know they had that album, and I clicked on it and looked. I'm like, oh, I remember that cover, and I remember it being. I do remember hearing that album and thinking, what the hell? So it seems like that's probably one of the reasons why they broke up. They changed their style, and not many people saluted. They're on a bigger label. They're on Relapse at that point, but now they're back and they're trying to be their young selves again. So. Anyway, yeah, the songwriting composition on here, it's is it setting any new barriers or breaking down any walls? It isn't. It's just doing one formula pretty damn good. Throwing in, you like the punk vibe, the doom thing every once in a while, but there's some sameness in this album and these songs, but it's there's a lot of charm. I think the charm greatly tips the scales in their favor. Production, Logan.
Yeah, this, as I said, goes hand in hand with the musicality and composition, and like they seamlessly deliver the evil and grotesque sound, that is the final product of World Without God. I just enjoy how dark this album sounds, and it kind of captures your imagination. To me, it definitely feels like a nighttime album, like around this time of year where, getting a little foggy nights and stuff, could be on the set of Exorcist or something like that. It just conjures these 70s horror, like really evil kind of horror images to me. And I think the production and how murky and just, kind of out there everything sounds helps significantly. Yeah, I like where the guitars sit in the mix. Truthfully, I could see how that could be an issue, and I think it maybe because this was so early on in my death metal listening, it didn't take too long for me to adjust to it. But there are still some like lead parts where it's like so. It feels so thin and wispy compared to the bass driven parts of the album. I could see someone having an issue with it, but as I said, I think it just adds to the overall feel and effect, and it just sounds like an evil spirit hovering over the music. And at the same time, they have lead parts which sound like this swirling, mass. They can still write a killer riff. Like there's some like very heavy, sharp-edged riffs on a lot of these songs, and the production does a good job of balancing out both of those, guitar tones, and making that riff the center of the sound when it finally comes in. I'm 100% on board with the vocal mix and where the vocals are. I think it's perfect. They're like, as I said, they're kind of at the forefront, but they blend in so effortlessly with how down tuned and low everything is that it doesn't feel like they're in front of the mix. They just it all feels like it's coming at you in one stroke, and just how the production puts that, to me, works out well. Final shout out, I enjoy how pristine and like kind of clean some of these interludes are. Like it opens up with the intro, which sounds kind of clean, and then there's that one section of let me try to think of what song that is.
Is it False Religion?
Where it kind of slows down. It has, False Religion. Yep, it has this haunting, clean acoustic section, which is just such a stark, contrast and kind of a moment of fresh air, and it comes right back. And it's pretty cool that they balanced out those two sounds, and like just look at when they do incorporate the keys and stuff on moments from like Putrid Intercourse and yeah, what a great song title, by the way. That's my MVP of song titles, Putrid Intercourse. You don't want to know. That's all I'm going to...
Some of us would call that Tuesday night.
Do what you got to do. Let's see. Resuscitation of Evilness has the... Was that the one that has like the bells or like the synths kind of come back?
The down-tuned church bell.
Yeah, Putrid Intercourse. Yeah, dude.
That's Putrid Intercourse. But that fits perfectly in the mix, and it doesn't feel out of place on the album. In fact, I think it adds a lot to it, mainly because the songs do sound very similar. I'm not going to lie with you, Marty. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is, you could get lost. You will get lost in this album, but moments like that help you kind of find your footing and find place. Yep. And I think the production lends to that. So
that's attributed to their age. Not every kid's going to come out of the gate swinging like Emperor, writing all these grand symphonies and mixing it with grim black metal. It's not going to happen that way. You gotta learn on your feet, essentially.
Yeah. No symphonies in Finnish death metal for sure. No. And I think for this scene, you couldn't ask for a better production. So I have no complaints.
very earthy, organic production. I would agree with you there. Jim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the production definitely makes this record what it is. I mean, choosing to make those bells on Putrid Intercourse sound warped like the way it does, like something as like. I think that was another moment when I first heard on vinyl. I'm like, is my record okay?
Yeah.
It is, and Marty brought up earlier, like the flange on Incantation of Restoration, or whatever. There's a flange or phaser. I always get those mixed up, but on the guitar at the start, those weird, bizarre little production choices. To Logan's point, they are these like wake you up moments throughout the record that give each song a little bit of character, because there is like a sameness to their riffs, and like we have already said many times, they were young, inexperienced, but the riffs were still cool, like, and all those little production choices elevated those riffs. When you're hearing those bells like in Putrid Intercourse, it prepares you for those really killer single string notes on 220 that are really cool. There's the sound effects at the end of Incantation of Restoration that were kind of unexpected. The weird whispers 2 minutes in, which wouldn't have been out of place on a Barrett record.
True. Yeah.
Yeah. And with False Religion, you've got that killer like the start stop thing, and then the really awesome headbanging riff 2 minutes in. The acoustic part there just sort of like just like pinches off that song and makes it elevates it even higher. You've already got these really killer riffs that you were vibing on, and then the acoustic guitar comes in, it just gives you a completely different feeling, and then it brings it back, and just it's a real cool choice. And the production of that guitar, it's so clean and pristine in comparison with like the murkiness of the guitars when they're electrified. It makes it a stronger song, to not have those acoustic guitars like buried in some way. They come out, they're really high up in the mix, and they sort of take over. So a really cool choice. But yeah, man, it definitely sounds like what it is. It sounds like an underground death metal record, from what we have come to expect from Finland. And I think the original label was something called Thrash Records.
It was Thrash Records.
Yeah. So not a label I've heard of otherwise. So I'm not expecting there to have been a lot of means, but these guys, really did the best they could in the studio. And hey, it stood the test of time. Here we are, listening or talking about this record 34 years later. So that counts for something in my book.
So Thrash Records put out a Afflicted single, a Bathom EP, Carbonized full length and single, Epitaph, Exit 13, Fatal, Mega Slaughter, Occult, Old Funeral, Sentence, the first Sentenced album, Vital Remains EP, Womb Bath. I mean, pretty underground, heavy ass label. Yeah, it didn't get a lot of distribution over here. I mean, I never saw any of that shit in the stores ever. Some of those records I mentioned, I still don't own. I've never seen them. So yeah. All right. Production, it's me. Yeah, I agree with these guys. I would say in the mix, I think it's very much a rhythm dominant. So the drums and the bass are kind of ever present. They're the two things that bring the bottom end. And there's a lot of bottom end on this album for sure. Guitars, like I mentioned, they have a really cool, interesting sound, but not a lot of attack to them. Gives it kind of the stoner doom vibe. And I think there are times the vocals get a little buried, because it's interesting the way I've kind of gone back and forth with the guy's vocals too, thinking, oh, he's struggling. But then you listen to it, he's doing like this kind of a miserable, murky hollering style. He's not really doing the fry, the brutal, rattling sound in there, like what was so common. He's kind of doing his own thing, whether he couldn't do the other style and had to adapt and do this, I don't know. Initially I didn't like it, but the more I listened to it and you kind of take into the consideration the way the album sounds and their style, it makes perfect sense. It's kind of different. And I think it gets a little buried, but on the same token, it might be the way he's singing as well. He's not putting a lot of treble sounds in his voice either. It's a very deep kind of moaning, hollering style. So I don't know. The production is pretty damn good. There's some, it's odd, but there might be the stoner doom vibe, but on the same token, you listen to it, it has kind of a similar vibe that a lot of those early death metal albums have. They're not in the best of the best studios, but that's fine. But the studio they're in has an idea of what's up, and they're actually capturing a very heavy performance. They're probably capturing a band with their actual gear doing, they that's how the band probably sounded in the rehearsal room. So that to me is kind of a cool little snapshot in time, and that's why, so many bands might try to obtain that now, because everybody's using the same damn plugins, or they're using the same amps. There's a lot of sameness in the tones these days because there's something tried and true that works, and people that's sought after. So people want to make that their own. Whereas back then you played with what you had. You're 16, 17 years old. You're not typically buying the top of the line, or the 5150 or the Marshall JC, whatever, or the Neuro DSP plugins. None of that shit's come down. You got to make do with what you have, and it made bands have their own style and sound. Anyway, least favorite songs on the album, Jim.
So, man, obviously, title track is just such a banger, man. There's so many really like headbanging moments for me. I love the riff. At 1:15, it's just feral. Then at 3 minutes, there's really cool doomy riff. It's just, there's so much energy. Perfect introduction into what you're getting into. A lot of the records we talk about on Wednesdays have great opening tracks. I'm talking besides the introduction here, of course, but so, it's not, unusual that they pick, this super strong song to go first, but they needed to, because it's amazing, and it absolutely is one of my favorites, and it just never gets old. I love the distorted bass break at like about 1.5 minutes in. It's awesome. Putrid Intercourse, man, besides all the awesomeness there, the warp bell stuff and the cool single string note that I was talking about earlier. I also like, I think the vocals are particularly pukey on that one. And I just like, there's something about just like really just gross about the vocals in a good way, and which goes with the subject matter. So yeah, that one is strong for me because I really love the vocal delivery there. Incantation Restoration, that's one with all the weird effects, the whispering, the phaser or flange or whatever. And there's a cool thing the drummer does about 120. He does this like over the riff. He does this thing. He's like tap 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 tap. It's not like a blast, or like say he kind of just like hits it like 4 times in a row and then stops, and this is 4 times again, and it's really cool and weird. But every time it happens, like my ears perk up. I'm like, man, that was such a weird thing to decide to do, but it's cool, right? It's different and it stands out. So love it for that reason. False Religion, super. That one of my favorite riffs on the record is 2 minutes in there. Just a really killer headbanging riff, and that acoustic break we talked about already. Super awesome. Godless Truth, man. I love those spooky keyboards that I mentioned earlier. I'm in spirit looking for a costume, but listening to death metal, that's awesome. Also, there's a cool hammer-on riff about 145. I'm a huge fan of riffs with the do hammer-ons, and that's one of the cooler riffs on the record. I think the album closes strong with Power Struggle of Belief. It's got that killer, like really well played. We've talked about the simplicity and the use of the band up until this point. But like the musicianship of that acoustic intro for the last song is actually really, really well done. It's a really cool, well played acoustic intro to that song. And, it lasts for like a full minute. It's not like they just play for a few seconds and suddenly death metal. It's like a full minute. It gives you time to breathe. And there's an awesome like tremolo, dive bomb. I think it's in that song. I'm trying to read my notes here. It's all I have terrible handwriting, chicken scratch. But there's a lot of cool triplets in that song. But when you mix death metal with like triplet style riffs, like I love that. So that all kind of contributed to that song being for me like a really great closer. So yeah, but in summation, there is no bad, as you may have noticed, there's no bad track for me.
No.
There was not, for me, there's no song where I was slogging through.
Yep.
I had something to enjoy about every song on this record. But my favorites are definitely World Without End, Incantation Restoration, and False Religion. So.
All right, Logan.
Yeah, probably will mirror Jim a little bit. Definitely one of those albums where I think we already talked about, when you're first getting into it, all the songs will kind of merge into an overall package, and it can be tougher to pick out like individual tracks, but it's worth it just to find these killer moments that are in each and every single song, because each song has an amazing like guitar riff, lead break, vomiting vocals, crazy synthesizer for some reason. There's something unique like hidden in each song. So I think I still lean towards the first half of the album, and especially the first third. World Without God is a great opening track, good example of everything that this album has to offer in one opening type package. I especially like the very doom but almost stoner doom like outro riff that kind of plays out that song. It's just got like the head bobbing groove there. And Putrid Intercourse, already talked about that. As I said, song title of the album, faster song overall, but there's this slower breakdown section with the bell, already been talked about. The solo after it is probably my favorite solo on the album. Almost feels a little Kerry King, little nod to Thrash there in the solo. Incantation of Restoration is probably my favorite song on the album, just because it is the weirdest sounding song on the album. It does the most weird shit on the album. From the guitar tone, this weird swirling guitar break that doesn't even sound like it's playing a riff. It's just like this feeling kind of wafting over you, to a killer riff that starts about 1 minute and 15 seconds. And then I love the whispery vocals. I actually really enjoy, that kind of change up. And I think whenever he does it, which is not very often, but it's just a nice break from the towering, gutturals that he typically does. False Religion is another highlight. One of the best riffs on the album happens at the 2-minute mark before segueing right into that haunting acoustic passage we've already talked about. I mean, I'm repeating myself over here. Power Struggle of Belief. Yeah, basically what Jim said. The opening is haunting, and when I was first getting into this album, a couple times I would hear it and be like, "Oh man, so they're ending the album on an outro. Bummer." And then it just kicks in with like a killer guitar break, and you're like, "This is why I love this band and I love this album." To me, it feels the most like kind of Suffocation style. Like it has this very crunchy, like brutal, like almost slamming, I want to say chorus, because they repeat it twice. The only time they repeat like a vocal passage on this album. And yeah, I love this lurching style that this song has, which does feel kind of different from the rest. As I said, no weak songs on here, but I do start to fade out towards the end of the album, and the two tracks, Infernal End and Godless Truth, end up being, not quite as memorable. Probably Infernal End more so than Godless Truth, which I do believe has a very killer riff on it. But Yeah, really, no actual song complaints though for me.
Yeah, me either, really. And like I said, there's a sameness to some of this, but it's not in a bad way, really. They do one thing really well. And granted, they are borrowing from other, they got the doom, they got the pseudo, DB punky type of vibe going on, but it all boils back down to death metal. But I find myself gravitating or really waiting for the faster moments of these songs to happen, like in World Without God, Putrid Intercourse, and Incantation of Restoration, for example. It's in every song, but they kind of put that carrot in front of you and try to get you going along with the slower stuff. Like in Putrid Intercourse, there's like these mid-pace moments. Stylistically, they feel more like Massacre to me. I keep going back to Massacre, but it's a good band that isn't really doing much with the riffs. The vocal lines are kind of following the riffs, which very common for a guitarist to do. Sometimes it's hard to split your brain to introduce a different vocal line to go over a guitar riff, but there's some predictable kind of power chord stuff in here. But then on this track in particular, when it slows down, that's when the murkiness and the twisted nature of Finland kind of takes over. And it makes me go, oh, okay. So then it makes me like the Massacre parts a little bit better going in, the way they kind of structured it. Incantation of Restoration is probably one of my favorites on here. It kind of just exudes darkness. There's just this vibe to it. It's just gross. It's evil. It's cool. There's like the pseudo blasting style of Yanni. He's sounds desperate as he seems like he's on the brink of falling apart, like we mentioned, but he doesn't. He kind of goes up to where he's the line of his speed, and he's okay there. And again, the heavier as hell drum sound. It feels very crushing. That the lower tuned heads just makes this music feel just a bit more suffocating, which is cool. Blasphemous verses. It starts off with the predominant bass line, and the tone. He's got a really good bass tone. It kind of stands out throughout the album. You get to that, I'm like, oh, okay, we're at blasphemous verses here, and locks up with that heavy bass drum sound. Good, it's a good combination. I do like False Religion as well. It's very energetic thanks to the blast beats on this one. Very power chord driven riffs. There's but they kind of evolve into like the sickly note based melody lines, which is very cool. They're very simple melody lines, but that kind of helps it feel a little more sinister, I guess. Puts me in mind of the Peaceful Three on when they slow down and do those melody lines. There's like a slight Peaceful Three vibe, early Paradise Lost, maybe. Touch of Evil in it. There's one thing I forgot to mention in the production. The tracks, it happened on Infernal End. There's some cool riffs on this song. It kind of hints at a desire to be more melodic, but they keep it very subtle, as if melody is cancerous to the brutality. So they like, we're just gonna test the waters on this melody, but not too much. Maybe it's a really good song. It's some of the tightest drumming on here by Yanni as well. Pretty good performance here. But did you guys notice that listening to it, that the drum sound changes a bit on this song? Did you guys notice this?
No, I didn't. I'll check that out though. That's curious.
I don't know if they tuned them or they made them a little tighter sounding, and then it happens again on Power Struggle of Belief. The sound shifts again on here. I don't know what it is. It seems like there's maybe less room ambience in the track. Doesn't affect it. It's a great song. It just makes it feel tighter. I don't know what changed in the sound feel in the production, or if my ears are dying a slow, painful death. And you get that buzz sound and in your that happens a lot. But I don't know if it's just my ears changing as I was listening to this, or if there is an actual subtle change. But yeah, again, I've got no real complaints with this. I think the intro to the album, it's that, what is a classical piece. I've heard the song before. Unnecessary. But you know what? That is a super insignificant complaint. The rest of it, Very solid record. Are we at the Judgment, final thoughts? Jim.
I don't know. Well, I think we've been saying it since the beginning, and this is a record that I really enjoy listening to. It's a lot of fun. It is beautifully imperfect in its way, but it is no less powerful for that reason. We don't always need our death metal to be perfectly composed. Or what we do need from it is for it to leave us, with a feeling after we listen to it, and that's what we get from Convulse. You get tons of vibe from this, tons of atmosphere, and it laid the groundwork, I think, for like all the murkiness that came after. And so it deserves praise for that, and I'm happy to own it, and I think you should too. So that's
I'll let Logan go last since he picked it. Yeah, it's one of those that has slipped through the cracks for me, and eventually it'll enter the collection. I have heard some of the newer stuff when they first got back together, pretty underwhelmed. They could tell they were trying to go for the old death metal spirit of their youth. I don't know what changed. Maybe it's different people. Maybe it's just not as their interest or their passion anymore. I don't know, but I quit investigating relatively quickly when they got back together. But as it stands, this record, it's pretty awesome death metal. It's a great addition to your dark, sinister Finnish black metal or death metal collection for sure. So yeah, for if I was going to rate it, I'd give it an 8. I give it an 8 for sure. Logan.
Yeah, I mean, the Finnish death metal scene, just to wax poetic about it once more. It's so unique because the bands that you see that are legit the Finnish death metal scene and didn't go on to be Amorphis or Sentenced, what you see is what you get. They're a band that nailed it kind of on their first outing, which is pretty impressive, and either broke up or immediately changed to become, a stoner death band, which is what happened to Convulse. And that makes all these albums all the more special, all the more, like, as you said, we're saying, Marty, it feels ephemeral, like you're capturing the moment that all these teenagers kind of came together and just, channeled whatever influences and energy they had in them. And that was basically all. There was no other preconceived notions. And there's, kind of warts and all, take it or leave it kind of style with a lot of these albums. And, World Without God is definitely guilty of that. But I definitely like it more because of that. So, yeah, this is a special album that I think perfectly captures the contribution that the Finnish death metal scene has to death metal overall. And I'm, impressed that these handful of albums still influences modern death metal bands to this day significantly. I mean, there are bands that are staking their whole careers on sounding, like this album more. Demigod, more Bific. Vacuous Depths here in the chat is saying that this is one of his biggest influences, that's awesome to hear. I'm going to be checking out his albums for sure after this stream. So it's just cool to hear how influential this sound is. And, I think that makes this album essential, along with basically any other Finnish death metal album that you can find from, probably debut from bands like Demilich, Demigod, Pertinence, Adrenalich, Funeber. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but plenty of others. But yeah, World Without God is a murky, evil, special album that I think is, unique and towers large in the scene of Finnish death metal. And I think it's a great starting point and a high watermark for it in kind of death metal overall. So it's easily a 9 out of 10 for me.
Right on. There you have it. World Without God. Good pick, Logan. It was cool to circle back around to this one and realize that it's really, really good. It's good. It was good. Since Kellen's not here to pick, I'm picking. We're going a little bit different direction this time, and we're going to cover Beyond the Boundaries of Sin by Hellwell. This is the debut release. This is Mark Shelton's side project. Guess what? Sounds like Manila Road. Sounds like Manila Road with John Lord-esque organ via a la Deep Purple. So
Nice.
Yep. Good album. Didn't get a whole lot of love for some reason. So we're going to talk about it next week. And Kellen will be back next week. And some show notes. We've got put up a review that I shot for this record, Yendud, the new one. It's coming out on Friday. I don't know how the hell Arcane Altar had copies, but hey, yay for me. Excellent Norwegian black metal. Friday. Mark Riddick is joining us again. We are going to be discussing our favorite demo, 7 inches, and EPs. So that'll be a fun one. It'd be good to have Mark back on the show. And next week, I think there's a revocation review coming from Melanie Loves Death Metal, but I don't know if that'll be this week or not. We'll see. What do you guys got going on? Logan, you're back to reality. You're trying to get settled. The fun's over. You're back to the grind, the slog. What's coming for you? What's coming for the Metal and Beer Snob channel?
The endless slog for sure, but actually still kind of a little busy doing a small little family trip this weekend just to see relatives for basically 2 days. So still kind of too busy to sit down and actually do something that I want to do for the old heavy metallurgy. But hopefully next week I'll have a review shot for you guys.
Sweet. Cool. Jim, what you got going on?
Nothing new right now, but after Kellen gets back, we are going to team up on a review of the new Evoken.
Oh, that's right. I'm very excited. We're pulling him in.
I'm actually going to do something besides album club. I'm very wary about it. Like this is my comfort zone, and I'm not a YouTuber. I hang out with my friends, but we'll see how it goes.
It'll be fantastic.
Cool.
All right, everybody. So there you have it. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday night. Good crowd. Good to see you. If you're new, subscribe. We appreciate it. We're almost at 7,000. Kind of a fun little milestone. And we'll see you Friday. These guys will see you next week. Good luck, Kellen. Cheers.
Good luck, Kellen.